Well, this is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal. I seem to be on a bit early today, but I'm delighted because we have so much news to cover. I begin with France having won the World Cup 2018 in what was a spectacular game. In fact, it was recorded as one of the most sensational in World Cup history, the highest scoring, most exciting, all kinds of unexpected developments. But frankly, I believe that this entire World Cup was most important because it gave the world like 10 days to become familiar with Russia, with the city of Moscow, with the Russian people, with Russian culture, which made an overwhelmingly favorable impression. So I think that this was a spectacular development, very, very good on all counts. And of course, France, they were shining 2 stars on the Arc de Triomphe because this is the second time they've won the World Cup, the last having been about 20 years ago. Now, the big story, of course, and it continues to rage and cause a great deal of discontent, attacks, some of which are really off of the charts. Trump sides with Russia against FBI at Helsinki summit. U.S. President Donald Trump has defended Russia over claims of interference in the 2016 presidential election. After face-to-face talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Mr. Trump contradicted U.S. intelligence agencies and said there had been no reason for Russia to meddle in the vote. Mr. Putin reiterated that Russia had never interfered in U.S. affairs, and indeed they had not. The whole Russian hacking meme, as many seem to forget, was made up by John Podesta and Robbie Mook within 48 hours of Hillary's concession speech. It was fabricated out of whole cloth. The motives were 3, to obfuscate the incompetent campaign they had conducted. Second, to divert attention from the contents of the WikiLeaks revelations, which led directly to Pizzagate, where John Podesta himself appears to be pedophile in chief. And third, to confuse, and obfuscate Hillary's connections with Russia herself, where she sold Russia, by way of Uranium One, a Canadian company, 20% of U.S. uranium reserves for a $145 million donation, call that a bribe, to the Clinton Foundation, with the approval of Barack Obama. I mean, this is completely outrageous. I observe that if, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg received the electric chair for having shared U.S. atomic secrets with the then Soviet Union, what do Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton deserve for selling off 20% of U.S. uranium reserves to Russia for $145 million? It's completely disgusting. The revelation came in a book by 2 investigative journalists who followed the Hillary campaign. The book is entitled Shattered. It has a 2017 copyright date, so it's been around for a while. And now I'm going to go into how we know technically that, in fact, there was no Russian hacking. We have these 12 Russians indicted in the Mueller investigation, where the Justice Department announced indictments against 12 Russian nationals as part of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 election, accusing them engaged in a sustained effort to hack Democrats' emails and computer network. But this is all complete and total bullshit. In fact, the United States is turning into one monstrous pile of bullshit. It's unbelievable. If you go back to 2017, for example, on 6 January, we learned Democrat National Committee did not allow FBI to examine the hacked servers before the agency blamed Russia as the culprit. Now just ask yourself, how could they know Russia was the culprit if they hadn't examined the servers? How could they even know there had been any hacking at all, that any hacking had occurred? Donald Trump jumped upon the news. What is going on? A legitimate question from a smart man who's being grossly abused. What else do we have? Even on January 10th, Comey, DNC denied FBI's request for access to hacked server. The FBI requested direct access to the Democratic National Committee's hacked computer servers, but was denied. Director James Comey told lawmakers on Tuesday. Now, if you're idolizing James Comey, which I do not, but which Democrats seem to do with great relish, he's telling you something funny was going on here, that this was a deceitful behavior by the DNC. Again, and this is particularly important because the claim is this is based on Guccifer 2.0 files. New blockbuster research shows Guccifer 2.0 files were copied locally, not hacked. New meta-analysis has emerged from a document published today by an independent researcher known as a forensicator, which suggests that files eventually published by the Guccifer 2.0 persona were likely initially downloaded by a person with physical access to a computer, possibly connected to the internal DNC network. The individual most likely used a USB drive to copy the information. The groundbreaking new analysis irrevocably destroys a Russian hacking narrative and calls the actions of CrowdStrike and the DNC into question, where the DNC hired this independent outfit called CrowdStrike to inspect their servers, not the FBI, the suitable law enforcement, but an intermediary they paid to give a report for which they paid too. I mean, this is very analogous to when Hillary bought the DNC hook, line, and sinker. I mean, it's a disgrace. The document supplied to disobedient media via Adam Carter was authorized by an individual known as a forensicator with a full reference. I'll tell you more. Well, we're talking about research, by the way, that's not done by some guy on the street. We're talking about Bill Binney. We're talking about Ray McGovern. These are two of the very best. I mean, Bill Binney worked for the NSC, okay? These guys know what they're doing. And when they concluded that this had been done directly to a memory stick and in the Eastern time zone at a rate much too fast to have been distant hacking, believe me, you can take that to the bank. All the evidence, all the pieces fit together. So what do we have here? Mueller, FBI, DNC, pulling a fast one on the public. I submitted this to the Wisconsin State Journal, but every newspaper, every TV station in the country has got its own representative from the CIA. They'll never publish it. Why? Because it speaks directly to the issues. Editor, according to the latest, special counsel Robert Mueller has indicted 12 Russian military intel officers for hacking the DNC in an attempt to affect the outcome of the 2016 presidential election, citing the 2.0 Guccifer files as proof. But back on 10 July 2017, William Craddock reported in Zero Hedge, new blockbuster research shows Guccifer 2.0 files were copied locally, not hacked, based upon the rapidity with which they had been downloaded and that it happened in the Eastern time zone. Months earlier, on 6 January 2017, Rachel Revesz in the UK Independent had reported Democratic National Committee did not allow FBI to examine hacked servers before agency blamed Russia as culprit. So just how dumb are we supposed to be? Even James Comey on 10 January 2017 in The Hill, just a few days later admitted, Comey, DNC denied FBI's request for access to hacked servers. The only explanation for which has to be that the DNC knew they would not find evidence of hacking. The DNC, the FBI, Mueller have the public in an uproar on the basis of claims of hacking by Russians that it cannot sustain. This goes far beyond a witch hunt and into the abyss of propaganda to promote a nefarious political agenda. We are being played for saps. And I'm doing my best to get this out and about to members of Congress, to editorial officers, newspapers around the country, most of which will ignore it, but I'll have made the best effort I possibly can, including by the way, just before I came on, for the Political Insider, which has a story that leaves me in disbelief, claiming that Trump has now reversed himself and acceded to the agencies that there really was Russian hacking, which is going to make me gag. I actually uploaded this letter there, okay, with my credentials where they can check out my CV and all that, but they have it on moderation, awaiting moderation. I predict it will never appear because even Political Insider is corrupt. More. Trump questions U.S. intel, not Putin, on Russia 2016 meddling, perfectly appropriately. Helsinki. Standing next to Russia's Vladimir Putin, President Donald Trump openly questioned his own intelligence agency's conclusions that Moscow was to blame for meddling in the 2016 U.S. election to Trump's benefit and seemed to accept Putin's insistence that Russia's hands were clean. Putin said he did indeed want Trump to win because of his policies, but took no action to make it happen. Indeed, he took no action, and Trump was exactly right. And indeed, we know how it even went about. It was Seth Rich, who was the IT guy for the DNC, who was disillusioned because Debbie Wasserman Schultz was sabotaging the campaign of Bernie Sanders with Seth Rich supported. He, with the advice of Kim.com, who has stated that he assisted Seth Rich in explaining how to do this, he downloaded the data into a memory stick and then transferred it, it appears, to Craig Murray, UK ambassador to Uzbekistan, an intelligence analyst and the head of a college who's a friend of Julian Assange, who gave it to Julian Assange to publish. Both Craig Murray and Julian Assange have affirmed they know the leaker and that he was not Russian. And after Seth Rich was taken out in an obvious act of retaliation, and we don't have to look far to have prime suspects in John Podesta and Debbie Wasserman Schultz taken out. This is a serious business, and it continues. Trump asked about Russian election interference replies, "Where is the server?" Now, many Americans had no idea what he meant when he said, "Where is the server?" But you, because you understand what I've just been explaining, understand. Another day, another media freak out over the Trump presidency. And this is from Political Insider, where I just posted this, and we'll see whether they put it up. Earlier today, Trump held a joint news conference with Putin. Opportunity the liberal media has been salivating to get, pitting the U.S. president against the leader of the country we know had something to do with our hacking of DNC emails, except we don't know it. It's bullshit. It's not true. For years, we've heard the same refrain over and over again. Russia hacked the election, whatever that means, and Trump campaign may have been working with them to make it happen. No evidence has been presented to prove that assertion, but it hasn't stopped liberals from making it anyway. Now, in a testy exchange with reporters, Trump just shut down the Russian collusion narrative with one simple question. Where the hell is a DNC server the Russians reportedly hacked emails from? Why hasn't the FBI been allowed to take a hold of it? Perfectly good questions. Here we have, watch, do you believe Putin or U.S. intel on the Russian attack? Trump, why didn't the FBI take Hillary Clinton's server? See, now that was a mistake. He didn't mean Hillary Clinton's server. He meant the DNC server. Where is the server? Trump just attacked our intelligence community and defended Putin's denial of involvement. This alone merits impeachment, they're claiming, except the facts are on Trump's side once again. We learned shortly after the 2016 election that the FBI neglected to actually investigate the DNC servers where emails were supposedly swiped from. And now that doesn't mean the Russians didn't pull a bunch of cyber shenanigans with our elections. In fact, the FBI has confirmed that is the case. So why then has the DNC been less than forthcoming with their email server? The U.S. intelligence community has confirmed Russia was behind the server attack. What is the DNC trying to hide? Trump has been asking the question for months, actually for years. yet the media doesn't appear to be digging in. It would be the easiest thing in the world to hand over the server, so why don't they do it? And get this, as Gary Franchi has reported, this was a striking event. Vladimir Putin invited Mueller to send a team of investigators to Russia so he could have access to the Russian end of it, inspect, interrogate the officers whom they're claiming to have been involved. He asked for the reciprocal opportunity for Russia to come and inspect, the DNC server. But obviously, the deep state isn't going to allow that because not even the FBI has had the chance. This just shows the deplorable state, the monstrous pile of bullshit that has become the United States. Now, here's some very interesting reports from Vladimir Putin. And we're going to see, well, the liberals, the Democrats, and I got to confess, I used to be one. I voted for Bill Clinton twice. I voted for Barack Obama twice. But when it came to Hillary versus Trump, it was, in my mind, no contest. Now, listen, here's what Putin himself says. Many things have changed for the better during the meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump in Helsinki, Finland, Russian President Vladimir Putin said in an interview with Fox News on Monday. A lot of things changed for the better during today's meeting, Putin told Fox News on Monday. This meeting is the beginning of a path. This is a start. We did make a good start today. Vladimir Putin said in an interview that Russia is prepared to extend START nuclear treaty that expires in 2021. In 2021, the new START treaty is about to expire. So what are we going to do next? Putin told Fox News. I reassured President Trump that Russia stands ready to extend this treaty, to prolong it. But we have to agree on the specifics at first because we have some questions to our American partners. Russian President Vladimir Putin stressed in an interview on Monday that Western efforts to isolate Russia have not succeeded. I think you see for yourself these efforts failed, and they were never bound to succeed, Putin told Fox when asked about efforts by Western countries to isolate Russia, where I believe the World Cup games, where soccer is the most popular sport in the world, have had a tremendous effect of creating a very positive understanding of Russia, the Russian people, and Russian culture that also is going to work against any further attempts to isolate Russia from the rest of the world. Moscow is interested in developing security, strategic stability, and economic relations with the U.S., Putin emphasized in the interview on Monday. We're interested in developing our relationship in the area of security and strategic stability, economic challenges, strategic challenges, and any other challenges that we have, Putin told Fox News on Monday. When asked about NATO potentially adding Ukraine or Georgia as new military allies, Putin said moving this NATO infrastructure toward our borders would be a threat. The reaction would be extremely negative. Let me point out that Bill Clinton began the violation of the solemn agreements entered into between Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan that were negotiated by Lee Wanta as a special ambassador that included agreements that have the force of treaties, and under our Constitution, treaties have the same standing as the Constitution itself, that the West would make no effort to politicize the Eastern Bloc countries, to militarize them, or turn them into NATO countries. Beginning with Bill Clinton, extended by George W. Bush and Barack Obama, we have violated those solemn agreements. It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. So Putin's entirely in the right. Putin has also commented on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. The Russian president stressed that this issue would require international guarantees, and Russia stands ready to help. I will point out again that I think President Trump contributed a lot. He did a lot to settle this issue. But in order to achieve complete denuclearization of the peninsula, it will take international guarantees, and Russia stands ready to make its contribution to the extent that will be necessary, Putin added. Ungrounded accusations. Putin slammed the UK Novichok poison claims with complete justification. By the way, let me mention, the Novichok isn't a Russian poison. The copyright, the patent for Novichok is in the USA. This is how bad it is, how blatant it is, how disgustingly the media distorts everything. When asked about the UK charges that Moscow was allegedly behind the Novichok-type nerve agent contamination, Vladimir Putin stressed that London had not provided any evidence on the case. We would like to get at least some sort of a documented evidence about it, but nobody gives it to us, Putin told Fox on Monday. He also said the case could be driven by domestic issues in Britain, saying nobody wants to look into this. We just see the ungrounded accusations. Why is it done this way? Why should our relationship be made worse by this? And let me add the following. If the Scoperow poisoning had actually been with his nerve agent, they would have been dead virtually instantaneously. The animals in their home would not have survived. They would not have been able to endure it, which is further proof that this is all one more example of bullshit. U.S.-Russian ties should not be held hostage to Mueller probe. During the wide-ranging interview, Vladimir Putin also explained his position on the so-called Russian interference in the U.S. elections by saying that the issue is basically an outcome of internal American political fights. These are domestic political games in the United States. It's not necessary to make relations between the U.S. and Russia hostage to this internal political struggle. It's quite clear to me that this is used in the internal political struggle, and American democracy should not be proud of using such dirty methods in political rivalries, he added. He's absolutely correct. Moreover, Moscow is surprised Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office has yet to send an official request related to the indictment of 12 Russian intelligence officers, given a U.S.-Russian criminal treaty is in place, President Putin said in the interview. With the United States, we have a treaty for assistance in criminal cases that exists since 1991. It's still in force and it works sufficiently today. Putin told Fox, why wouldn't Special Counsel Mueller send us an official request within the framework of this agreement? Or investigators would be acting in accordance with this treaty. They will question each individual that American partners are suspecting of something. Why no single request was filed? Nobody sent a single formal request. It simply surprised me. Further confirmation, it's all bullshit. None of it's according to Hoyle. It's all phony. And anyone who thinks that Mueller has clean hands is deceiving themselves. This guy was appointed before 9/11. We know 9/11 was an inside job. It was brought to us compliments of the CIA, the neocons, and the Department of Defense and the Mossad. Mueller was there in charge of the FBI. He didn't utter a peep. He left after the Boston bombing, which was exposed already the day of the event, where Kraft International personnel were the perps, who wearing the khaki trousers, black jackets, black baseball caps. We have videos and photos of Kraft International personnel wearing black nylon backpacks to the location where one of the bombs blew up. It was in a black nylon backpack. In fact, this one had a white square sewn on it. It was on the back of the Kraft International. The one blew up, had the white square. He's rushing away, no longer carrying it. The FBI investigated, included both bombs that had exploded, had been in black nylon backpacks. But interestingly, when they photoshopped the Saranov brothers into the scene, they screwed up. They botched it. They put in Zoker with a silver backpack, much larger, and Tamerlan with a dark colored backpack, much larger. The backpacks don't match. They weren't responsible. The whole thing was phony. I have a whole book about it if you want to check it out, but then you hear about it here on the show every time I'm on. So just remember, this is as phony as could be. And when they peered through the smoke, they saw bodies missing arms and legs, but there was no blood. It only showed up later It didn't actually come out of tubes, but little orange backpacks, bags, duffel bags, little orange duffel bags, of which there were 5 or 6 in the vicinity after they cleared the area. They used amputee actors and a smoke machine, which startled me so much that when we found photographs of it, I put it on the back cover. Check it out at moonrockbooks.com, because there's no point in your allowing yourself to be played. No point in allowing yourself to be taken for a sap. And it's stunning, absolutely stunning to me. This has been going on in the USA. And Robert Mueller was there, and also there when Sandy Hook took place. And we even have the FEMA drill for the 2-day exercise. There was no shooting. The school had been closed by 2008. There was nobody there. And I can see we're coming up to the break. I expect I'm going to hear the sound of the break. Let me tell you, you can download the book for free. Just put in "Nobody Died at Sandy Hook." You can download the PDF for free, because when Amazon.com banned it, after it had been on sale from 22 October 2015, on 19 November, after selling nearly 500 copies, it was obvious to me this was political. So I released the book for free as a PDF, and you can have it on your own desktop today, free of charge. Just get it. When we return, Rand finds lots to like in Trump's presser with Putin. Cut the president some slack, says a Kentucky senator and some of his GOP colleagues. Wise words from Rand Paul. I'll be right back. Mitchell, I don't know if you can hear me, but you didn't reset, so I can't hear the bumper music.
I had reset. Yeah, so
well, how
break is playing, or I don't know what. I see it hanging there, but it's not playing. We'll just continue till it plays, or maybe.
Oh, you mean it's not playing? So I would be hearing it if it were. Should I just go on with the show?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. As the GOP's long dominant hawkish wing hammers President Trump over his chummy appearance Monday with Russian President Vladimir Putin, a minority of Republicans aren't ready to clip their president's diplomatic wings. Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, whose non-interventionist streak has long put him at odds with GOP foreign policy orthodoxy, plans to travel to Russia in early August to play shuttle diplomacy for Trump. In an interview on Monday, Paul said he hopes to meet with Trump before he heads overseas to see if there's anything he wants us to follow up on. It's gotten so ridiculous that someone has to stand up, and we should try to engage even our adversaries and open up lines of communications, Paul said. We're going to talk to the president about some small steps in order to try to thaw the relations between our countries. It's hard to imagine any other GOP president empowering a legislator like Paul to pursue his goals of diplomacy with a longtime adversary like Russia. Paul's focus, for now, is on cultural exchange and fostering cross-Atlantic visits by U.S. and Russian ambassadors. To be sure, Paul has few Republican companions who share in his embrace of Trump's approach to Russia. But some of his colleagues are also prepared to give Trump a wider runway in his dealings with Putin. 2 weeks before Trump met with Putin in Helsinki, a group of 7 GOP senators and 1 House member visited Russia over the July 4th holiday week, a trip that would have been unthinkable when President Barack Obama was in office. Those senators said they talked tough with top officials like Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, despite the Russian media's portrayal of them as weak on Moscow. And they certainly don't cite Russia as a friend, they believe Trump's engagement with Putin is the right call. Asked whether Trump made a mistake by going to Helsinki, Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin, a senator represented me, replied, no, no, no. And I could not agree more. Johnson, who indicated openness to relaxing some sanctions on Russia after joining the visit there, suggested that Trump's news conference with Putin may be trying to improve relations with the public face you put on it. The president's got a delicate task in one sense because engagement, even with someone as evil as Putin, is necessary, added Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn of Texas. The way I interpret it is the president's trying to maintain some rapport with him. GOP voices more critical of Paul and Trump's stance toward Russia took center stage on Monday. Mitt Romney called Trump's performance alongside Putin disgraceful. Senator John McCain called the meeting with Putin a tragic mistake. But Paul chalks that up to Trump derangement syndrome. He believes his trip, planned in concert with the libertarian-leading Cato Institute, will allow the United States to eventually make inroads with Russia in the ongoing civil war in Syria, denuclearizing North Korea, and getting Russian troops out of Ukraine. Republicans that are making those criticisms are either the pro-war Republicans like McCain and Graham or the anti-Trump ones like Sass, Paul said. They are motivated by their persistent and consistent dislike of the president. Indeed, Trump has gradually but significantly shifted the GOP's views of Russia, in part because as leader of the party, he has made it impossible for its lawmakers to criticize him and win primaries. Though Trump declined on Monday to endorse the U.S. Intelligence Committee's assessment of Russian meddling in the election and suggested the bad relationship between the U.S. and Russia was both countries' faults, many Republicans praised him as forceful with Russia indeed, if not necessarily always in word. It was a good idea for the president to meet with Putin and discuss the issue. Take a look at how tough the president has been on Putin. He's been incredibly tougher than previous administrations, said Senator John Barrasso, Republican of Wyoming, mentioning sanctions and providing weapons to Ukraine. It's important. Montana Senator Steve Daines, another Republican who traveled to Russia during this month's delegation, said that the intelligence community has been very clear that they interfered in our elections, despite Trump's attempt to assign equal blame. It's appropriate, very appropriate, to confront President Putin with the behavior of Russia, which is unacceptable, Daines said, obviously buying the Russian hacking meme. Asked whether Trump had offered that sort of confrontation, Daines said he had yet to see the president's news conference. But look at this. The U.S. media is losing its mind over the Trump-Putin press conference. I mean, this is dumbfounding. The media's mania over Trump's Helsinki performance in the so-called Russiagate scandal reached new depths on Monday, says Joe Loria from Consortium News. The reaction of the U.S. established media and several political leaders to President Donald Trump's press conference after his summit meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday has been stunning. Writing in The Atlantic, James Fallows said, there are exactly two possible explanations for the shameful performance the world witnessed on Monday from a serving American president. Either Donald Trump is flat out an agent of Russian interests, maybe witting, maybe unwitting, from fear of blackmail and hope of future deals, out of manly respect for Vladimir Putin, out of gratitude for Russians' help during the election, out of pathetic inability to see beyond his 306 electoral votes. Whatever the exact mixture of motives might be, it doesn't really matter. Or he is profoundly ignorant, insecure, and narcissistic that he did not realize that at every step. He was advancing the line that Putin hoped he would advance, and the line that the American intelligence, defense, and law enforcement agencies most dreaded, because he was speaking the truth and they are not. Conscious tool, useful idiot, these are the choices, though both are possibly true, so that the main question is the proportions. Never before have I seen an American president consistently, repeatedly, publicly, shockingly advance the interests of another country over those of his own government and people. Frankly, in my opinion, This has been Trump's most heroic moment, most heroic stand. And if he backs down, that's the shame of it. But he had the courage and integrity to take the stand in Moscow, in Finland, with Vladimir Putin. As soon as the press conference ended, CNN cut to its panel with these words from TV personality Anderson Cooper. By the way, Anderson Cooper has long, like Will Blitzer, been identified as CIA. You have been watching perhaps one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president at a summit in front of a Russian leader, surely, that I've ever seen. Well, Anderson Cooper is a disgrace to his country. He's a disgusting blot of excrement, not only on national television, but in his words and deeds. He was also a participant in covering up at Sandy Hook. Ridiculous, where we've been able to prove how they faked the kids out of photographs of older children, where Noah Posner is the prime example, where Noah was made up out of photographs of Michael Wagner, purportedly his older stepbrother. And we have shown a sequence where you can see Noah turning into Michael Wagner. But it turns out it's worse than that, because Lenny Posner, who claimed to be Noah's father, is none other than the father of Michael Wagner, Reuben Wagner. I mean, this is disgusting. And if I, sitting in my computer in this little village in Wisconsin, can sort all this out with my wonderful colleagues, do you think the New York Times or CNN or NBC or any of the other media giants are incapable? No, they know the truth. They have to know the truth. They are simply intent on deceiving the American people. They are the disgusting creatures here, not Donald Trump, Bill Benny, Ray McGovern, Seth Rich, Ron Johnson, for that matter, Rand Paul. Those are the heroes here today. David Gergen, who for years has gotten away with portraying himself on TV as an impartial political sage, then told CNN viewers, and this is as disgusting as it gets. I've never heard an American president talk that way, but I think it's especially true when he's with someone like Putin, who is a thug, a world-class thug, that he sides with him again and again against his own country's interests and his own institutions that he runs, that he's in charge of the federal government. He's in charge of these intelligence agencies, and he basically dismisses them and retreats into this. We've heard it before. But on the international stage, to talk about Hillary Clinton's computer server, it's embarrassing, interjected Cooper. It's embarrassing, agreed Gergen. But I mean, this is ridiculous. How stupid are we supposed to be to believe this kind of total bullshit? Coming from David Gergen and Anderson Cooper, gag me with a spoon. White House correspondent Jim Acosta, ostensibly an objective reporter, then gave his opinion. I think that sums it up nicely. This is the president of the United States essentially taking the word of the Russian president over his own intelligence community. It was astonishing, just astonishing, to be in the room with the U.S. president and the Russian president on this critical question of election interference, and to retreat back to these talking points about DNC servers in Hillary Clinton's email, when he had a chance right there in front of the world to tell Vladimir Putin to stay the hell out of American democracy, and he didn't do it. Because Vladimir Putin had stayed the hell out of American democracy. Vladimir Putin didn't do it. The very sources he cites were those that were responsible. In other words, according to these media figures, Trump should just shut up and not question a questionable indictment, which Acosta, like nearly all the media, treat as a conviction. They're ignoring the evidence, such as that I've recounted for you already here. The media's handlers were even worse than their assets. Former CIA Director John Brennan tweeted, Donald Trump's press conference performance in Helsinki rises to and exceeds the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. It was nothing short of treasonous. Not only were Trump's comments imbecilic, he is wholly in the pocket of Putin. Republican patriots, where are you? Let me remind you that this guy, Brennan, is completely disgusting. He created ISIS with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in 2012 over the objections of Michael Flynn, who was at the time the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Indeed, because of his opposition, where they went ahead to create this horrendous terror group that has slaughtered tens of thousands, raped thousands of others, turned women into sex slaves. This is John Brennan. This is Barack Obama. This is Hillary Clinton. He recommended, because Mike Flynn had opposed it, this outrageous act intended to bring pressure on Bashar al-Assad, the democratically elected president of Syria, let me remind you, and eventually to put pressure on the Persian nation of Iran, which has not attacked any other nation with a war of aggression since 1775. I repeat that, which has not attacked any other nation with a war of aggression since 1775, before the ratification of the Constitution or the election of our first president, which means Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another nation longer than the United States has existed as a constitutional republic. I mean, the bullshit is monstrous. Here's where the Republican patriots are, Brennan. That's how a press conference sounds when an asset stands next to his handler. Former RNC chairman Michael Steele tweeted, "I've had high regard for Michael Steele, but it appears to me he has missed the boat here big time and he ought to know better." Representative Liz Cheney, the daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney, who, by the way, was the executive director of 9/11. They had to steal the election in Florida and dump Al Gore so that Bush and Cheney could bring us 9/11 compliments of the CIA, the neocons, and the DOD, and the Mossad. Dick Cheney said on Twitter, "As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, I'm deeply troubled by President Trump's defense of Putin against the intelligence agencies of the U.S. and his suggestion of moral equivalence between the U.S. and Russia. Russia poses a grave threat to our national security." Well, frankly, I'm inclined to agree there isn't a moral equivalence because the United States has been launching war after war after war. The United States is the greatest aggressor nation in the world, with second perhaps only to its ally in the Middle East, Israel, which practices atrocities on a daily basis. Russia, compared to the United States, is a paragon of virtue. Russia is far morally superior to the United States in relation to international relations. Any objective observer would tell you that. But these are gross partisans. These are tools of the intel community. These are professional liars, phonies, and fakes who are used to betraying the United States of America. It is as disgusting as it gets. All these were reactions to Trump expressing skepticism about the U.S. indictment on Friday of 12 Russian intelligence agencies for allegedly interfering in the 2016 U.S. presidential election while he was standing next to Russian President Vladimir Putin at the press conference following their summit meeting in Helsinki. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be Russia, Trump said. I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today, which is a weak argument because there's such much more powerful evidence from Ray McGovern, from Bill Benny, from Kim.com, from the failure of the FBI to even inspect the servers. I mean, how can they be trying to perpetrate this hoax on the American people when the FBI has never even examined the servers? Think about it. This is a monstrous hoax right there going on before your very eyes, with some of the greatest traitors to the United States perpetrating them. Once again, right before your very eyes. They're interviewing on national television John Brennan. They're interviewing on national television John Podesta, who made up the Russian hacking meme to cover his ass. I mean, this is a disgrace. The indictments, which are only unproven accusations, formally accused 12 members of the GRU, Russian military intelligence, of stealing Democratic Party emails in a hacking operation and giving the materials to WikiLeaks to publish in order to damage the candidacy of Trump's opponent, Hillary Clinton. But that's not what happened at all. It was Seth Rich who was disillusioned by the fact that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was sabotaging the campaign of his preferred candidate, Bernie Sanders, moving 13 primaries Bernie had won over to Hillary, completely wrongfully, to guarantee she would be the nominee. The indictments were announced on Friday, 3 days before the summit, with a clear intention of getting Trump to cancel it. He ignored cries from the media and Congress to go ahead with it, which was a courageous and rightful act. Over the weekend, Michael Smirskone of CNN actually said the indictments proved that Russia had committed a terrorist attack against the United States. What complete rubbish. This is in line with many pundits who are comparing this indictment that will most likely never produce any evidence to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. The danger inherent in that thinking is clear. Trump reasonably questioned why the FBI never examined the computer servers of the DNC to see whether there was a hack and who might have done it. Instead, the private company CrowdStrike, hired by the Democratic Party, studied the server and within a day blamed Russia on very dubious grounds. Why haven't they taken the server, Trump asked. Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know. Where is the server? And what is the server saying? But being a poor communicator, Trump then mentioned Clinton's missing emails, allowing the media to conflate the two different servers and be easily dismissed as Gergen did. He's not been paying attention anyway. He's probably on the verge of senility. Given statements like that, you have to follow the evidence. You have to follow the facts of the matter, which David Gergen obviously has not. Let's discuss. At the press conference, Putin offered to allow American investigators from the team of special counsel Robert Mueller, who put the indictment together, to travel to Russia to take part in interviews with the 12 accused Russian agents. He also offered to set up a joint cybersecurity group to examine the evidence and asked that in return Russia be allowed to question persons of interest to Moscow in the United States. Let's discuss the specific issues and not use the Russian and U.S. relationship as a loose charge for this internal political struggle, Putin said on CNN. Christiane Amanpour called Putin's clear offer obfuscation. I'm telling you, the dirty dealers, the hidden assets are coming out of the woodwork here, right and left. Even if Trump agreed to this reasonable proposal, it seems highly unlikely that his Justice Department will go along with it. Examination of whatever evidence they have to back up the indictment is not what the DOJ is after. As I wrote about the indictments in detail on Friday, the extremely remote possibility of convictions were not what Mueller was apparently after, but rather the public perception of Russia's guilt resulting from fevered media coverage of what are, after all, only accusations, presented as though it were established fact. Once that impression is settled into the public consciousness, Mueller's mission would appear to be accomplished. Senator Rand Paul has completely obliterated John Brennan's role in all of this, by the way, with a single tweet. Senator Rand Paul. This is coming from the guy who voted for the Communist Party USA candidate in 1976. Give me a break. Brennan is that disgusting. He's not only a Muslim, and there's every reason to believe that Barack Obama is Muslim too, and he, of course, was unqualified to serve as president of the United States, for which there's abundant evidence, including some from newly released documents of the DNC server, including a fabricated student ID from Columbia University, which nevertheless identified himself as a foreign student, explaining why Obama, as his first act of president, sealed his educational record just when every little kid in the country wanted to study his history because he was the new and first black president of the United States. The media is angry that he basically blamed the Russian probe for damaging Russian-U.S. relations, which is partially true, of course, among many factors, including the media itself stirring the pot. I'm not a Putin fan, but good Lord, the media took one sentence and is losing their minds. I want you to pay very close attention to this. Is President Trump a traitor because he wants peace with Russia? The Democrats say he is. This is coming from Paul Craig Roberts, our nation's leading public intellectual. The U.S. Democrat Party is determined to take the world to thermonuclear war rather than to admit that Hillary Clinton lost the presidential election fair and square. The Democratic Party was totally corrupted by the Clinton regime and now is totally insane. Leaders of the Democrat Party, such as Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, my former co-author in the New York Times, have responded in a non-democratic way to the first step President Trump has taken to reduce the extremely dangerous tensions with Russia that the Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama regimes created between the two superpowers. Yes, Russia is a superpower. Russian weapons are so superior to the junk produced by the waste-filled U.S. military security complex that lives high off the hog on the insouciant American taxpayer that it's questionable if the U.S. is even a second-class military power. If the insane neoconservatives such as Max Boot, William Kristol, and the rest of the neocon scum get their way, the U.S., the UK, and Europe will be a radioactive ruin for thousands of years. House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi of California, minority leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, that declared that out of fear of some undefined retribution from Putin, a dossier on Trump perhaps, the President of the United States sold out the American people to Russia because he wants to make peace. It begs the question, what does Vladimir Putin, what do the Russians have on Donald Trump? Personally, politically, and financially, that he should behave in such a manner. Such a manner Pelosi is speaking about is making peace instead of war. To be clear, the Democratic minority leader of the U.S. House of Representatives has accused Donald Trump of high treason against the United States. There is no outcry against this blatantly false accusation, totally devoid of evidence. The prostitute media, instead of protesting this attempt at a coup against the President of the United States, trumpet the accusation as self-evident truth. Trump is a traitor because he wants peace with Russia. Here is Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer of New York repeating Pelosi's false accusation. Millions of Americans will continue to wonder if the only possible explanation for this dangerous behavior is the possibility that President Putin holds damaging information over President Trump. If you don't believe that this is orchestrated between Pelosi and Schumer, you are stupid beyond belief. Here is disgraced Obama CIA Director John Brennan, a leader of the fake Russiagate campaign against President Trump, in order to prevent Trump from making peace with Russia and thus, by making the world safer, threatening the massive, unjustified budget of the military security complex. Quote, Donald Trump's threatening the massive, unjustified budget of the military. Donald Trump's press conference performance in Helsinki rises to and exceeds the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. It was nothing short of treasonous. Not only were Trump's comments imbecilic, he is wholly in the pocket of Putin. Republican patriots, where are you? There are many more, and more too, from the CIA bought and paid for BBC. Notice that not one Western media source is celebrating and thanking Trump and Putin for easing the artificially created tensions that were leading to nuclear war. How can this be? How can it be that the Western media is so opposed to peace? What is the explanation? The Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and the North Koreans, as well as the rest of the world, desperately need to notice the extremely hostile reaction to peace on the part of the U.S. Democratic Party. Many members of the Republican Party, including the despicable U.S. Republican Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham, and the Western prostitute media, a collection of people on the CIA payroll, according to the German newspaper editor Udo Uckhoft and the CIA itself. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and the rest of the corrupt filth that rules over us all are in the pay of the military security complex. Just go and investigate the donations that are re-election campaigns. The $1,000 billion budget of the military security complex, amplified by the CIA's front corporation and narcotics business, provides enormous sums with which to purchase the senators and representatives that the naive American voters think they elect. Do you know how large $1,000 billion is? You'd have to live for thousands of years and do nothing for 24/7 except count to reach that figure. It's a sum that nurtures the recipients, and the recipients regard it as worth protecting. And right now, today, at the moment, we're faced with a massive effort of the military security complex, the neoconservatives, the Democratic Party, and the prostitute media to discredit the elected president of the United States. Far more when we return from this break. Yeah, Michael? Mitchell? Mitchell, what?
Yeah, we're live, Jim.
Yeah, okay. Oh, you mean we're back on the air?
And advancing into a fifth dimension consciousness. They are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances. Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge, Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A, for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitors' peaceful contact and the ongoing project of cleansing the Earth.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you. Why am I here? You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here. You haven't answered my question. The Matrix is older than you know, as you are undoubtedly gathering. The anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation. Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, FlippsFlips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lassard.
Even the government admits that 9/11 was a conspiracy. But did you know that it was an inside job? That Osama had nothing to do with it. That the Twin Towers were blown apart by a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes. That Building 7 collapsed 7 hours later because of explosives planted in the building. Barry Jennings was there. He heard them go off and felt himself stepping over dead people. The U.S. Geological Survey conducted studies of dust gathered from 35 locations in Lower Manhattan and found elements that would not have been there had this not been a nuclear event. Ironically, that means the government's own evidence contradicts the government's official position. 9/11 was brought to us compliments of the CIA, the neocons of the Department of Defense, and the Mossad. Don't let yourself be played. Read American Nuked on 9/11. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio. Freedom Substack.
What the? Not good. Oh, I don't want Studio A. Yeah, we back on the air?
Yeah.
Okay.
We will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes and the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Hello, this is Maggie Rose McGrath of The Concord Show.
Coming to you on Monday and Tuesday, Studio A, noon Eastern.
At Studio B on Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern, with educational, instructional information, and situational updates, often with wonderful guests on the current landscape in the U.S. and overseas.
This is a go.
We are with you, side to side, and back to back.
Please join us on Monday through Wednesdays.
As well as other hosts and guests here on Revolution Radio.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal, and I'm furious about all of this because these intel agencies are turning the United States into the world's largest pile of bullshit. And I say to you, if Donald Trump has in fact reversed his position, there can only be one explanation. They have threatened to murder him or his wife or his sons or his daughter. I mean, that would be what's going on. That's what these people do. We're talking about some of the most disgusting, evil figures the world has ever seen right here in the United States. You people like John Brennan and Hillary Clinton are perfect exemplars. It's just disgusting. That has to be the explanation. There's no other reason on God's earth why Donald would do such a thing if it has in fact happened. I continue with the observation to Paul Craig Roberts. I emphasize this man is our nation's leading public intellectual. He's better connected. He has a better understanding of what's going on than anyone else in the country, in my opinion. Here's the continuation. Today, right now, at this moment, we are faced with a massive effort of the military security complex, the neoconservatives, the Democratic Party, and the prostitute media to discredit the elected president of the United States and to overthrow him in order that the utterly corrupt elite that rule America can continue to hold on to power and to protect the massive budget of the military security complex that, along with the Israeli lobby, funds the elections of those who rule us. Trump, like Reagan, was an exception. And it's the exceptions that accumulate the ire of the corrupt left wing, bought off with money, and the ire of the media, concentrated into small, tight ownership groups indebted to those who permitted the illegal concentration of a once independent and diverse American media that once served on occasion as a watchdog over government. The right wing, wrapped in the flag, dismisses all truth as anti-American. If Putin, Lavrov, the Russian government, the traitorous Russian fifth column, the Atlanticist integrationists, the Chinese, the Iranians, and North Koreans think that any peace or consideration can come out of America, they are insane. Their delusions are setting themselves up for destruction. There is no institution in America, government or private, that can be trusted. Any government or person who trusts America or any Western country is stupid beyond belief. The entire Russiagate hoax is an orchestration by the military security complex led by John Brennan, Comey, and Rosenstein. The purpose is to discredit President Trump for two reasons. One is to prevent any normalization of relations with Russia. The other is to remove Trump's agenda as an alternative to the agenda of the Democratic Party. President Trump is almost powerless. Putin, the Chinese, the Iranians, and the North Koreans should recognize this before it is too late for them. President Trump cannot fire and arrest for high treason Mueller and Rosenstein. And Trump cannot indict Hillary for her numerous unquestionable crimes in plain view of everyone, or Comey or Brennan, who declares Trump to be wholly in the pocket of Putin for trying to overthrow the elected president of the United States. Trump cannot have the Secret Service question the likes of Pelosi and Shermer and McCain and Lindsey Graham for false accusations that encouraged the assassination of the President of the United States. Trump cannot trust the Secret Service, which accumulated evidence suggests was complicit in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, where I've detected more than 15 indications of Secret Service complicity in setting him up. And while Paul Craig Roberts continues in Robert Kennedy, Bobby was suspicious of the Secret Service and wouldn't accept Secret Service protection. That was a CIA op with the LAPD and covert agents taking him out at the Ambassador, where he was shot behind the right ear by the security guard who was accompanying him, holding his right arm with his left, firing the same caliber weapon as Sirhan was firing from in front behind Bobby's right ear from 1.5 inches. And then as he fell, firing more shots, 2 of which entered under Bobby's armpit, where he grabbed his tie, and you can find the tie clasp on the floor of the pantry in some photographs, if you know what you're looking for. I mean, it's that disgusting and disgraceful. That disgusting and disgraceful. And Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover played major roles in both. If Putin and Lavrov, so anxious to be friends of Washington, let their guards down, they are history. As I said above, Russiagate is an orchestration to prevent peace between the U.S. and Russia. Leading military security complex experts, including the person who provided the CIA's daily briefing of the President of the United States for many years, and the person who devised a spy program for the National Security Agency, have proven conclusively that Russiagate is a hoax designed for the purpose of preventing President Trump from normalizing relations between the U.S. and Russia, which has the power to destroy the entirety of the Western world at will. Here is the report from the retired security professionals who, unlike those still in office, cannot be fired and deprived of a career for telling the truth. Keep in mind that no media informs you better than my website. If my website goes down, you will be left in darkness. No valid information comes from the U.S. government or the Western prostitutes. If you sit in front of the TV screen watching the Western media, you are brainwashed beyond all hope. Not even I can rescue you, nor God himself. Americans, and indeed the Russians themselves, are incapable of realizing it, but there is a chance that Trump will be overthrown, and a Western assault will be launched against a handful of countries that insist upon sovereignty. I doubt that few of the Americans who elected Trump will be taken in by the anti-Trump propaganda, but they are not organized and have no armed power. The police, militarized by George W. Bush and Barack Obama, will be set against them. The rebellions will be local and suppressed by every violation of the U.S. Constitution by the private powers that rule Washington, as always has been the case with rebellions in America. In the West, which the Russians are so anxious to join, all freedoms are dead. Freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of inquiry, freedom of privacy, freedom from arbitrary search, freedom from arbitrary arrest, along with the constitutional protections of due process and habeas corpus. Today, there are no countries less free than the United States of America. Why do the Russian Atlanticist integrationists want to join an unfree Western world? Are they that brainwashed by Western propaganda? If Putin listens to these deluded fools, Putin will destroy Russia. And I must say that Paul Craig Roberts is not alone. Another astoundingly astute student of American politics is Patrick J. Buchanan. And as in the case of Paul Craig Roberts' brilliant post, which I have reposted on my blog at jamesfetzer.blogspot.com, where you can read it at your leisure. I have also posted Patrick J. Buchanan, Trump calls off Cold War II. Patrick J. Buchanan. Beginning his joint press conference with Vladimir Putin, President Trump declared that U.S. relations with Russia have never been worse. He then added pointedly, that just changed about 4 hours ago. It certainly did. With his remarks in Helsinki and at the NATO summit in Brussels, Trump has signaled an historic shift in U.S. foreign policy that may determine the future of this nation and the fate of his presidency. He has rejected the fundamental premises of American foreign policy since the end of the Cold War and blamed our wretched relations with Russia not on Vladimir Putin, but squarely on the U.S. establishment. In a tweet prior to the meeting, Trump indicated the elites of both parties, indicted the elites of both parties. Our relationship with Russia has never been worse, thanks to many years of U.S. foolishness and stupidity, and now the rigged witch hunt. Trump thereby repudiated the records and agendas of the neocons and their liberal interventionist allies, as well as the archipelago of war party think tanks beavering away inside the Beltway. Looking back over the week from Brussels to Britain to Helsinki, Trump's message has been clear, consistent, and startling. NATO is obsolete. European allies have freeloaded off U.S. defense while rolling up huge trade surpluses at our expense. Those days are over. Europeans are going to stop stealing our markets and start paying for their own defense. And there will be no Cold War II. We are not going to let Putin's annexation of Crimea or aid to pro-Russian rebels in Ukraine prevent us from working on a rapprochement in a partnership with him, Trump is saying. We are going to negotiate arms treaties and talk out our differences as Ronald Reagan did with Mikhail Gorbachev. Helsinki showed that Trump meant what he said when he declared repeatedly, peace with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing. On Syria, Trump indicated that he and Putin are working with Bibi Netanyahu, who wants all Iranian forces and Iran-backed militias kept far from the Golan Heights. As for U.S. troops in Syria, said Trump, they will be coming out after ISIS is crushed, and we are 98% there. Remember, it was John Brennan, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama who created ISIS over the objection of Michael Flynn, whom Barack Obama fired at the recommendation of John Brennan precisely because of his opposition to creating one of the great terrorist groups the recent world has ever seen. There is another underlying message here. America is coming home from foreign wars and will be shedding foreign commitments. Both before and after the Trump-Putin meeting, the cable news coverage was as hostile and hateful toward the president as any this writer has ever seen. The media may not be the enemy of the people Trump says they are, but many are implacable enemies of this president. Some wanted Trump to emulate Nikita Khrushchev, who blew up the Paris summit in May 1960 over a failed U.S. intelligence operation the U-2 spy plane shot down over the Urals just weeks earlier. Khrushchev had demanded that Ike apologize. Ike refused, and Khrushchev exploded. Some media seem to be hoping for just such a confrontation. When Trump spoke of the foolishness and stupidity of the U.S. foreign policy establishment that contributed to this era of animosity in U.S.-Russia relations, what might he have had in mind? Was it the U.S. provocatively moving NATO into Russia's front yard after the collapse of the USSR? Was it the U.S. invasion of Iraq to strip Saddam Hussein of weapons of mass destruction he did not have, that plunged us into endless wars in the Middle East? Was it U.S. support of Syrian rebels determined to oust Bashar Assad, leading to ISIS intervention in a 7-year civil war with 500,000 dead, a war which Putin eventually entered to save his Syrian ally? Was it George W. Bush's abrogation of Richard Nixon's ABM treaty and drive for a missile defense that caused Putin to break out of the Reagan INF treaty and start deploying cruise missiles to counter it? Was it U.S. complicity in the Kyiv coup that ousted the democratically elected pro-Russian regime that caused Putin to seize Crimea or hold on to Russia's Black Sea naval base at Sevastopol? Many Russian actions we condemn were reactions to what we did. Russia annexed Crimea bloodlessly, but did not the U.S. bomb Serbia 78 days to force Belgrade to surrender her cradle province of Kosovo? How was that more moral than what Putin did in Crimea? If Russian military intelligence hacked into the emails of the DNC, exposing how they stuck it to Bernie Sanders, Trump says he did not collude in it. Is there, after 2 years, any proof that he did? Trump insists Russian meddling had no effect on the outcome in 2016, and he is not going to allow media obsession with Russiagate to interfere with establishing better relations. And he was impeccably right, because there was no Russian meddling. Former CIA Director John Brennan rages that Donald Trump's press conference performance in Helsinki was treasonous. He is wholly in the pocket of Putin. Republican patriots, where are you? Well, as Patrick Henry said long ago, if this be treason, made the most of it. Pat Buchanan, Paul Craig Roberts are speaking the truth. The media has gone hysterical because it's in the pocket of the deep state, of the military-industrial complex, of the CIA, and of the neocons who are dual U.S.-Israeli citizens. This is a great tragedy for the United States, for the West, for our future, for our children's future. If, in fact, the Donald has been threatened and intimidated to repute his heroic, gallant stand that was based absolutely upon the evidence of the case, contrary to everything you're hearing from the prostitute media that Paul Craig Roberts so appropriately condemns. And I must say, on Monday, Scott, I was invited to guest host on the Power Hour. And I invited Scott Bennett, who's a former U.S. Army Intel and PSYOPs officer, to be my featured guest. He was on the entire show. Something you may or may not know about Scott is that when he was in the Army, he became very wary of certain moves that were being made by the U.S. intel agencies. They suspected he was becoming a troublemaker, a whistleblower. So they railroaded him, and he wound up imprisoned in a low-security penitentiary in Pennsylvania, where he became acquainted with Brad Birkenfeld, who, of all things, was knowledgeable with the intimate details of how 9/11 was financed. Scott Bennett became the great whistleblower about the 9/11 finance, which he published in his book Shell Game, which he shared with many prominent members of the Congress who have done absolutely nothing about it. He himself is a hero, an heroic figure whom I admire beyond words. If you want to follow our 2-hour interview on the Power Hour, go there. You'll find the schedule there. You'll see hour 1 and hour 2 are archived there, which they do immediately after the show. Really, if you want to review the bidding then, before these more recent developments, check it out. We had, of course, the effort here to derail the entire summit. Here you can see it perfectly illustrated by Chuck Schumer, Democrats. Trump should cancel Putin meeting after hacking charges. Top congressional Democrats urged President Donald Trump to call off his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin after a grand jury in the U.S. indicted 12 Russian intelligence officers for hacking a Democratic Party computer network during the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign. As they say, a grand jury can be instructed to indict a ham sandwich. That's what they were doing here because there was no Russian hacking. We have it from the best cyber experts we have ever had in the United States, Bill Benny and Ray McGovern from Kim.com, who aided Seth Rich in the leak, from Craig Murray and Julian Assange themselves. This is just stunning, just monstrous bullshit. President Trump should cancel his meeting with Vladimir Putin until Russia takes demonstrable and transparent steps to prove that they won't interfere in future elections, said Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York in a statement Friday. Glad-handing with Vladimir Putin on the heels of these indictments would be an insult to our democracy. No, Chuck Schumer, John Brennan, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, those are an insult to our democracy. They are corrupt as the world has ever seen. Neocons panic as the Trump-Putin meeting could mark the close of the Syrian proxy war. A lot of good stuff is published by Tyler Durden on Zero Hedge. When multiple op-ed pieces appear in the pages of the New York Times, Washington Post, and the CFR, that's Council on Foreign Relations' own Foreign Affairs, authored by neocons simultaneously pleading with Trump, don't get out of Syria, all within the same week. This is typically an indicator that the president is about to do something good. Trump is set to meet with Putin one-on-one this coming Monday in Helsinki after a contentious NATO summit and a sufficiently awkward visit with Theresa May, and mainstream pundits' heads are exploding. The Post's Josh Regan writes, Trump and Putin may be about to make a terrible deal on Syria. And Susan Rice suddenly emerges from obscurity and irrelevance to say in the Times that Trump must not capitulate to Putin, while urging the administration not to prematurely withdraw United States forces from Syria, thus ceding total victory to Russia, Mr. Assad and Iran. From North Korea to Afghanistan to Syria to Ukraine, Rice advises the typical regime change script of harsh additional sanctions anywhere the dictates of Washington are not strictly adhered to. Similarly, Eli Lake links together the main regime change wars begun under Obama, while lamenting their potential winding down as a result of Putin and Trump meeting, as indicative of living in some alternative universe. The price of Russian cooperation in Syria cannot be U.S. capitulation on Crimea, Lake writes, and further calls such a possibility the most dangerous possible outcome. Let me just observe that Crimea was not annexed. Crimea voted under international supervisions in accordance with international law to become a part of Russia. Historically, Ukraine, including Crimea, had been part of Russia. Historically, where it was Zbig Brzezinski in his book, The Grand Chessboard, who proposed a geopolitical strategy of separating Ukraine from Russia because Ukraine had been the breadbasket of Russia. And he felt that without Ukraine, Russia would be a crippled bear, grossly weakened. The Kagan-led neocon think tank ISW, meanwhile, is outraged. The administration appears to lack the will to use America's military might to counter Assad, Iran, and Russia, saying the United States should invest in building leverage for future decisive action. And then there's Senator Lindsey Graham's meltdown on Twitter this week in reaction to both the Syrian army victoriously raising the national flag over Dara and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu telling President Vladimir Putin during a summit that Israel has no problem with Assad staying so long as Israel can preserve freedom of action if it had. In a significant change of posture toward Damascus, Netanyahu told reporters in Moscow, "We haven't had a problem with the Assad regime. For 40 years, not a single bullet was fired on the Golan Heights." More when we return after this break.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Were they conspiracies? Have you ever wondered if we really did go to the moon? If Paul McCartney died in 1966 and was replaced by an even better musician? Did you know that Saddam Hussein died in a B-1 bomber strike on 7 April 2003 and was replaced by one of his doubles, who was put on trial and hanged in his place? Or that Osama bin Laden died in Afghanistan on the 15th of December 2001 and was buried in an unmarked grave in accordance with Muslim traditions? That the raid in Pakistan was faked? There's more, including 4 chapters about the end of World War II, which prove that events we've been taught were very different than we have been told. Don't let yourself be played. Read, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. We will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Even the government admits that 9/11 was a conspiracy. But did you know that it was an inside job? That Osama had nothing to do with it? That the Twin Towers were blown apart by a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes? That Building 7 collapsed 7 hours later because of explosives planted in the building? Barry Jennings was there. He heard them go off and felt himself stepping over dead people. The U.S. Geological Survey conducted studies of dust gathered from 35 locations in Lower Manhattan and found elements that would not have been there had this not been a nuclear event. Ironically, that means the government's own evidence contradicts the government's official position. 9/11 was brought to us compliments of the CIA, the neocons of the Department of Defense, and the Mossad. Don't let yourself be played. Read America Nuked on 9/11. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, your host has been joined by his cat, who's 18 years old, and we don't expect to have much longer, so he gets to meow on the show if he likes. To continue, then there's Senator Lindsey Graham's meltdown on Twitter this week in reaction to both the Syrian army victoriously raising the national flag over Dara and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu telling President Vladimir Putin during a summit that Israel has no problem with Assad saying, so long as Israel can preserve freedom of action if attacked. In a significant change of posture toward Damascus, Netanyahu told reporters in Moscow, "We haven't had a problem with the Assad regime. For 40 years, not a single bullet was fired on the Golan Heights." That was enough to send Graham's head spinning. Radical Sunni groups will say correctly that Assad is a proxy of Iran and the Ayatollah. It means the Syrian war never ends and ISIS comes back, he said in a strange twist of logic. It gives credence to the arguments of terror groups. Israel's Haaretz newspaper featured Senator Graham's reaction. Without Assad's blessing, the flags of Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard would not be on Israel's front door, Graham tweets in response to Netanyahu claiming Israel has no problem with Assad, as Trump readies for the Putin summit saying, "He's not my enemy. Interventionists are raging." Then Trump, of course, while he was there in Europe at the NATO meeting, laid a smackdown on Germany at the NATO breakfast. This is retrospective. Germany is paying billions to Russia for energy while at the same time expecting the U.S. to help protect them with NATO from Russia. Now even Sean Hannity, who has pretty good relations with Trump, seems to me to have missed the point here. What is the point of NATO protecting Europe from Russia if Europe feels so comfortable with Russia that they're willing to put all of their energy in the hands of Russia? That is a positive, cordial relation of mutual dependency that suggests we don't need NATO. Sean Hannity grossly misunderstood and thought that Trump was suggesting they should cut off their gas and oil deals with Russia and instead make them with the United States. That, in my opinion, was not the point. And here, of course, he brought up that of the NATO nations, very few of them actually satisfy their commitment to contribute 2% of GOP to the common defense, where the United States is carrying by far the lion's share. The NATO secretary, last year was the biggest increase in defense spending in a generation. Trump, why last year? NATO, because of your leadership. Trump, that stare at reporters to make sure they heard it. Germans favor withdrawal of U.S. troops, not paying more for U.S. protection. This is significant too. Almost every second Germany favors the withdrawal. Almost every second German favors the withdrawal of U.S. forces based there, according to a poll taken prior to the NATO summit, at which Donald Trump accused Berlin of relying on Washington's protection and not contributing enough. Some 42% of Germans are ready to see 35,000 U.S. troops return home. A new YouGov poll conducted on behalf of the German press agency revealed only 37% wanted to see U.S. troops stay in Germany in some capacity. The remaining 21% did not decide. The call for withdrawal is especially strong among left-leaning voters, with 67% supporting the move. Some 55% of Alternative for Germany right-wing backers also called for the removal of U.S. forces. The Germans stand 48% in support of ending the U.S. presence in Germany. What you have to appreciate is that Trump has actually been working on fulfilling his campaign pledges to reduce American forces abroad, ending the wars. But the neocons of the deep state don't want him to do it. And in spite of his incredibly courageous stand, they may, in fact, have crippled him by threatening to murder his sons, his daughter, and his wife. Believe me, mark my words, the only circumstance under which Trump would reverse his heroic stand with Putin, which he knows full well is completely justified by the facts of the matter, would be threats of that magnitude. Here's a nice piece. After all, NATO is a con game. Okay, well, Trump did it again, antagonizing allies. This time it was Germany that took the main hit over the fact that it pays Russia billions of dollars for oil and gas while relying on the U.S. for its defense against Russia. And yes, that is a strange situation, but it's by no means the only angle to the story. There are many more. For one thing, the U.S. has by far the largest military industry. So it makes a lot of money off the billions already spent by NATO partners on weaponry. That is to say, the military arms industry makes that money. Of course, Raytheon, Boeing, et al. Would like to see them spend more. But once they would have done that, they would clamor for even more after that. At some point, one must ask how much should really be spent, how much is enough, how much is necessary. The military-industrial complex, MIC, has every reason to make the threat posed by enemies as big as they possibly can. So knowing that, we must take media reports on this threat with tons of salt. And that is not easy because the MIC has great influence in politics and the media. But we can turn to some numbers. According to Global Firepower, the U.S. in 2018 will spend $647 billion on its military, while Russia is to spend a full $600 billion less. $47 billion. So Russia is spending $47 billion, while the U.S. is spending $647 billion. No wonder the middle class has been impoverished. The working man can't make a decent living. The military-industrial complex is sucking all of the money out of the U.S. economy for its own privileged class under the most atrocious circumstances imaginable. And the U.S. Senate has already voted in an $82 billion boost recently, right? On the campaign trail. They didn't want to speak the truth about any of these matters, that the U.S. is governed by the military-industrial complex and the Zionists, that the Israelis require every new member of Congress to sign a pledge when they first come to Washington, put the interests of Israel ahead of those of the United States, where those who do not find themselves confronted with a well-financed alternative candidate, or even that their district has been redrawn and they no longer have a seat. Cynthia McKinney, who revealed this grim situation to the American people years ago, was able to transcend those obstacles and serve 8 terms in the House of Representatives. But even as noble a figure as Dennis Kucinich, whom I regarded as the smartest member of Congress, was not. His district was redrawn and he lost his seat. There are other numbers that suggest Russia spends $60 billion, but even then, if Moscow spent just 10% of the U.S., say $64 billion, and much less than once all NATO members' expenditure is included, how much of a threat can Russia realistically be to NATO? Here's a very interesting report from antiwar.com. Again, before the summit with Putin, Trump declares EU a foe alongside Russia and China. He says he has a big problem with Germany. In comments made during the Sunday Meet the Press show, and that would have been back on the 15th or the President Trump declared that the U.S. has a lot of foes, singling out the European Union first and foremost among them. He went on to say that he has a big problem with Germany. In talking of America's foes, Trump said the EU is a foe and Russia is a foe in certain respects. while China is a foe economically. He said his problems with the EU centered on what they do to us in trade. Trump downplayed the significance of these declarations, saying it doesn't mean anything to be a foe except to acknowledge they are competitive. It's noteworthy, however, that last week he downplayed the idea of Russian President Vladimir Putin as an enemy, presenting him as a competitor instead. European Council President Donald Tusk faulted Trump's comments, insisting the EU and the US are best friends, and claiming that anyone who said they were foes is spreading fake news. Trump's complaints about EU members don't stop there, however, saying, I have a big problem with Germany because Germany made a pipeline deal with Russia. During the NATO summit, Trump accused Germany of being under Russian control. During Sunday's comment, he said the Germans are waving a white flag by buying energy from Russia. But I think, as I explained already, what's really going on there is rather different. And I think because this was prior to the 4-hour meeting with Putin, that part of what Putin meant when he said things are much better now was a clarification of what Trump had meant by those remarks. Get this, it was bizarre when Trump came to London. London's Muslim mayor approves of a giant balloon of Trump in a diaper. Next week, President Trump will be in the UK for a 3-day visit, and this was back on July 7th, published by Dr. Eowyn in her wonderful Fellowship of the Mind's blog. This is how London, the capital of the UK, will greet the President of the United States of America, Britain's supposed ally. A giant balloon of President Trump as a baby wearing a diaper will fly over the British parliamentary building, Westminster. The London anti-Trump protest was ridiculed as the baby blip disappoints. It turned out to be much smaller than expected. The widely heralded Trump baby balloon protest in London fell flat, as many were left wondering what the organizers had spent £30,000 on. The Trump baby blip received endless mainstream coverage in the run-up to Trump's UK visit, yet was airborne for less than 2 hours and appeared tiny amidst the London skyline. Here's a fascinating document that we have reported upon, or I shall report here, and you'll hear more about it in the future, where Scott Bennett and I discussed it on the Power Hour yesterday. Top secret Strap 3 SIGINT UK lot eyes only. This shows that on 28 August 2016, GCHQ, that's like the head of the British CIA, filed for permission to execute Project Folsom at the request of the U.S. president, seeking intelligence gathering into the Trump Organization and Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated, both located at 725 Fifth Avenue, New York, USA. Activities include foreign and U.S. domestic signals collection in regard to communication with Russian hostile actors. In other words, this is the proof that Barack Obama was complicit in initiating spying on the Trump Organization by the British, using those phony documents we've heard so much about, including the Christopher Steele dossier. And guess who was the transmitter of this request? None other than Susan Rice. I'll read part of this again. IOCCO approved Folsom on 15 September 2016, allowing 90 days of initial SIGINT gathering with the potential for renewal should the situation allow. This memo's purpose is to request a 90-day renewal of Folsom's original charter, with further potential for renewal thereafter. Since Folsom's start, a clear pattern of actionable leads have accrued, both from the Trump campaign itself, from former MI5 agent Michael Steele, that should be Christopher Steele, and from others, see figures 1 through 7 in attachment. U.S. National Security Advisor Rice has requested that we continue our surveillance during the transition period, as internal U.S. intelligence is potentially compromised by the incoming Trump administration. For these reasons, we are requesting that Folsom's charter be renewed for another 90 days. So when Trump said he was being spied upon by the Obama administration, which denied it again and again and again, he had it exactly right. Obama knew it when he was making the denial. Susan Rice was the conduit, so she, of course, knew the spying was going on. This is completely disgusting, and we have the document that proves it. Just to give you the background here, there are 5 nations called the Five Eyes: the US, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. And when they want to spy on domestic parties whom their own laws prohibit, forbid, they request, as was done here, another member of Five Eyes conduct the spying operation within their own country on behalf of that country in order not to technically violate the law. This, frankly, is a clear violation in intent. It's trying to get around the wording, the letter of the law, not the spirit, which it obviously violates. So here you had Barack Obama using Susan Rice based upon a fabricated dossier to request that the UK spy on Donald Trump. This is a fact. This is not a theory. This is real. This is not speculation. This is a disgrace. It is disgusting. And it impugns the integrity of Barack Hussein Obama, Susan Rice, and all the other gutter snipes who were involved in this breach of the United States law, circumventing it by using another member of Five Eyes to spy on the Trump campaign. Disgusting. We have the interesting development, too, in the UK, which is ban guns. That knife and gun crime has rocketed across England and Wales as police numbers hit historic lows. The offenses are disproportionately concentrated in London and other cities. And let me just say to you, it is well known that when guns are banned, crime goes up. You're getting all this poppycock based on the false claim that the more guns you have, the more homicides you have, which is completely and utterly false. Reported knife crime has seen a 21% year-on-year spike across England and Wales, new figures show. Gun crime has also seen a 20% rise amid a surge in incidents being reported to police. Forces registered 37,443 offenses involving a knife or sharp instrument in the years ending September 2017, the highest tally since comparable records started in the 12 months to March 2011. Gun crime saw 6,694 recorded offenses. The shocking statistics came as police numbers over the same 12 months hit historic lows. In a statement, the Police Federation of England and Wales said falling officer numbers had a direct influence on crime. Forces in England and Wales logged in a total of 5.3 million crimes in the 12 months up to September 2017, a 14% increase compared with the previous year. Statisticians said the data shows continuing rise in the number of higher harm violent offenses, which were most evident in knife and gun crime categories. But we know worldwide there's an inverse correlation between gun ownership and homicides. The US and Canada, for example, have among the highest gun ownership in the world, but also the lowest homicide rates. Latin America and South America, including Brazil, among the lowest gun ownership, but the highest homicide rate. Africa, among the lowest gun ownership, the highest homicide rate. Even Russia, low gun ownership rate, high homicide rate. I mean, for God's sake, boys and girls, look at Chicago. How dumb are we supposed to be? Chicago not only has among the most stringent gun control laws in the world, but also the most horrendous homicide rates. Okay? What you do is restore sensible gun laws, allow concealed carry, and the gun crime rate drops to virtually zero. I have reported this in a video I did entitled The Second Amendment and the Politics of Gun Control at 153video.net. We also know, of course, that Peter Strzok, and his name is pronounced parallel to Sock, has committed all sorts of atrocities on behalf of Hillary Clinton and the DNC, where I'm given to understand that, in fact, Strzok is one of many FBI employees who are actually CIA, that the CIA long since infiltrated the FBI to extend its tentacles. Harry Truman believed that creating the CIA with the National Security Act of 1947 was the greatest mistake of his administration. Undoubtedly, he was right. The greatest benefit that could possibly occur to the United States and the world would be to obliterate the CIA, get rid of it, create a new agency restricting exclusively to intelligence with no operational capabilities whatsoever. That would be what would be best. But if you think it's going to happen, you're dumb beyond belief. Here are 5 of the most controversial moments from Peter Strzok's chaotic testimony to Congress. Number 5, Bob Goodlatte asked Strzok how he can smell Trump supporters at a Walmart in Southern Virginia, which he had said in a tweet to Lisa Page, his paramour in the agency. Number 4, John Ratcliffe confronts Strzok about using official FBI phones on official FBI time to talk to Lisa Page about stopping Trump and impeaching Trump. The following comes from CNN. When you said you never crossed that bright, inviolable line, what you meant to say was except for 50,000 times, except for hundreds of times a day, where you went back and forth expressing your personal opinions about effing Trump and stopping Trump and impeaching Trump on official FBI phones on official FBI time, said Representative John Ratcliffe of Texas. Agent Strzok, are you starting to understand why some folks out there don't believe a word you say? Number 3, Darrell Issa forces Strzok to read back some of the anti-Trump text messages he sent to Lisa Page. Number 2, Trey Gowdy uses his extensive legal skills to absolutely grill Strzok about his contradictory statements, and Trey Gowdy was brilliant. Number 1, Congressman Gohmert went where nobody else was willing to go when he asked Strzok, how many times did you look so innocent into your wife's eyes and lie to her about Lisa Page, with whom he was having an affair? I've talked to FBI agents around the country. You've embarrassed them. You've embarrassed yourself, Gohmert said. And I can't help but wonder when I see you looking there with a little smirk. How many times did you look so innocent into your wife's eyes and lie to her about Lisa Page? A Democratic Representative Cohen, however, Stephen Cohen of Tennessee, took the opposite stance. To Peter Strzok, he said, if I could, I would give you a Purple Heart. How grotesque. And here you have a cartoon showing Robert Mueller firing Peter Strzok because he's embarrassed Mueller, whose corrupt investigation has nowhere to go, phony, contrived. We know, however, in the early 2016, that Peter Strzok was attempting to conflate an intelligence laundering system, where back in March of 2018, we outlined a strong likelihood about the origin of the material used in the FISA application. That was to get the ball rolling and to justify the British spying on Trump and how it appeared to emanate from contractors with access to the NSA FBI database, Fusion GPS, Nellie Orr, Christopher Steele, and ultimately Nellie's husband, Bruce Orr, and back into the FBI. Later, CTH described that as an intelligence laundry operation. Today, while necessarily needing to hold to an official position, the FBI had only begun investigating candidate Trump on July 31st, 2016. FBI agent Peter Strzok inadvertently confirmed every aspect of our previous suspicion. Here's the full backstory. Senator Chuck Grassley's letter to Rod Rosenstein outlines the FBI interviews of twice demoted DOJ Deputy Bruce Orr. We have Jim Jordan discussing Strzok testimony and admission of receiving dossier material from Bruce Orr. This is important. This is very important. The collective DOJ, FBI, and allied contractors' activity in 2015 and 2016 is the origin of the political opposition research that developed into the Trump investigation via the FISA applications. Jordan appears to be one of the few who understand the importance of the timeline. Jim Jordan discussed FBI agent Peter Strzok's admitting he received the dossier material from DOJ Deputy Bruce Orr. Bruce's wife was hired by GPS Fusion to assist in the formation of the Clinton-funded opposition research that became the Steele dossier. There's even a fascinating timeline about it that Scott Bennett talks about in interviews we have done. Lisa Page's testimony highlights that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein lied to Chairman David Nunes. On January 3rd, 2018, House Intelligence Chairman David Nunes and DOJ Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein entered an agreement for witness testimony. One of those witnesses was FBI Attorney Lisa Page, Andrew McCabe's former special counsel. Washington, January 4th. House investigators will get access this week to all remaining investigative documents in unredacted form that they had sought as part of their Russia inquiry under a deal between Russian Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, including access to Peter Strzok and Lisa Lawyer Page. But Lisa Page had never heard about it. Mark my words, this whole Russian thing is a gigantic pile of bullshit and a disgrace to the United States. God save Donald Trump and the United States of America.